Wanted to talk about my homeless experiences stories, but before I get into that, this is some of the most intense, crazy things that really makes me very scared and nervous about who really is in control and what they're willing to do to me and torture me and torment me, that this doesn't have any other purpose other than to mentally torture me physically, and doing that physically to control me mentally that way by using these various different types of electronic devices that they're using these various different types of electronic devices that can make me shit, make muscle tissue twitch. It's a frequency energetic magnet that is being beamed and shot at me that is able to spread out to a larger circumference to a narrow laser beam twitch where it just makes the muscle tissue twitch. And I was sitting here about 2 hours ago, about an hour ago, and I keep yelling out and I keep shouting out every time they're shooting me. I said, "Stop shooting me! Stop shooting me!" Because I know that they can hear me, and I know that there's recording devices here that are being broadcasted live. As I'm sitting on my bed, not doing anything, they shoot an electronic device that is able to make the muscle tissue twitch to about this circumference, like a gun, and it makes this part of the tissue then twitch and it feels like I'm pressing a trigger. It feels like, and it's very intense of how detailed, how precise this electronic device is at shooting me on my body, and it feels like somebody's shooting a gun, like they're forcing my hand like it's shooting a gun. And as soon as they do that, they shoot something that, I don't know what it is, but they shoot something over here where the crucifix table is, and and I talk about this all the time, it sounds like somebody's throwing a piece of like pebble or rock up against the surface. That's what it sounds like, and it goes, and that's what they're doing. And so you can see what a target is, and they're shooting me. I just talked about in my other video how Billy was murdered, that they found his body many years ago. I talked about this, that he showed up to Robert's funeral. He was there at Robert's funeral, and and he was murdered. And they set him up. They told him to go to a party. He went to a party, and there was something like 15 people, and I was told about 8 of them or 10 of them jumped him at the same time in the backyard. And they all just started beating up on him, and they beat him up real horrifically. And then they tied him up, and there was I believe there was 3 to 4 guys that got into the car after they tied him up, got into the car, and they all drove. And then one of the guys got out of the car. And I don't know what the story is, in the middle of some desert, some open area, forest, I don't know where it was, and away from civilization, and he was on his knees. They had him on his knees, and they shot him in the back of the head, and they had a plastic bag over his head so he couldn't see where he was going and what was happening. Now this is in real life. And this is the frightening things that I talk about, that somebody shooting these electronic devices and using this as a funny game is what they're doing. And I just had this video conversation about. But I wanted to make this video that I think it's important for me to talk about on how some of this crazy psychosis, this doesn't, I don't believe that you can do this to a normal person and think that you're fixing them. This is someone that's doing this because they know that they have so much control over me that they just either want me to go to prison or jail. They're making me pass gas now. They either want me to go to prison or jail, but it's because they're never going to get caught. It is very hard to tell a police officer, let alone to even get them to want to do anything and file a report, that somebody's shooting me with an invisible electronic device, because it sounds very, very fucking crazy. When that murder happened, I got a phone call and I was at my house, and I was living there by myself, and it was one of the most. It was when I was. It was a very dark moment of my life, because I was within 5 months of being kicked out of my house. You know, I got 6 months. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I hadn't talked to Billy in maybe probably just a couple months. And he always drove by, said hello, and see, look, they just shot something at me. They just shot something at me and then shot it at my chest. And they tell this person to use this weapon, this frequency weapon. I hadn't talked to Billy in probably 2 months, but he always drove by my house and always said hello. And he got a brand new truck, and he was a family guy. You know, he was taking care. He liked having a kid, and you know, kind of doing his own thing in life. And but I smoked weed with him. I don't think I ever did cocaine with him. I may have maybe once, but I don't think I did. I wasn't a very big hardcore drug addict with Billy or many other friends. I did with Robert Zarate a number of times. They always had the connections, I didn't. But you know, it's crazy to me, because the murder that happened was it was like if somebody told you, a friend that wasn't even involved in drugs and was like a normal person, all of a sudden gets kidnapped, goes to a party that is framed. Like, this is what they did. They framed him to go to a party. This is what Mary told me. Mary Zarate told me that they had arranged for him to go to a party, and the people were already going to plan to do that. And once he got there, something happened, and there was like 10 people there waiting for him, and there was a big gang. They all jumped and swarmed, beating him up horrifically. And it was like 3 or 4 of them that got into the car, and one of them shot him. And it was that's to my understanding. And they said that it was like somewhat of a distant family member, which they had questions that it was called this guy named Tomate. And Tomate, like this guy and Chivo, which I knew from Oak Cliff, that were related to Robert Zarate and they're very close when they were kids growing up. He ended up I think he ended up in prison at some point, but he was kind of a thug, but he wasn't a bad kid. He came from a bad adolescent family. He wasn't a bad kid. At least I didn't see him as that. And I went to Six Flags with him, with Chivo and Tomate. And Daniel Box knows him probably even better than I do. He knows Tomate and Chivo. Probably met them, hung out with them more times than I did. And I was told that it was connected. They said that they thought it was Tomate or it was someone that was one of his friends. And this guy came from Oak Cliff. But it didn't make any sense, because, I don't know, maybe Zarate could have been lying or saying something, because I had no association with them. Tomate, I hung out with him when I was like 13 years old. We all went to Six Flags with Robert Zarate, Chivo, Tomate, me, Daniel, I think, and Robert Zarate. We all went when we were kids. His dad dropped us off. And it was something that I remember. And it was very frightening. I was very scared, because, let me tell you this, 4 months to 5 months before he was murdered, I talked about this in my other video. I was at my house. I wasn't at my house. I was with Billy, and I think we were smoking a joint, and he was real happy because he just got a job over at some satellite cable TV company of some kind, installing satellites, and he said he got it, and he found the job in the newspaper. So then he bought a truck, and he bought a pretty nice looking truck. It was fairly new, all yellow, and he was going to drop me off. And when he dropped me off, he pulled in the driveway, and I noticed that there was a car that was parked at my house that I'd never seen before. And someone had broken into the house. I swear to God, someone had broken into the house. And I looked over a bit. As soon as he pulled up, I said, "Oh shit, someone just broke into the house." And we both, and he was like, "Oh shit, you want me to get out the car? We'll go get their fucking ass." And he was going to jump and help me, and him were going to go inside my house and beat the fuck whoever was inside my house. You know, like, and I'm talking about like for real. And he was like, because he was very supportive. I had his back and he had my back, and you know, and he was like, "Hey man," he goes, and he said something like he was ready because he was fighting in a boxing match in Univision TV channel. We pull up, and I said, "No, hold on." I said, and I didn't say this like ordering him, nothing like that. I said, "No, hold on. It'll be safe. It'll be better if I go out. If I don't come out in 5 minutes, call the police, because, you know, I don't know if they have a gun, and I don't know if they have a knife. I don't know who it was. But somebody had broken into the house, and one of the ways I could tell was because the backyard gate had been completely knocked down. And I don't know if I don't think the front door was open. Someone had broken into the house. And I was like, hold on, if I don't come out in 5 minutes, call the police, because they probably have a knife or a gun. So that way, you know, somebody can go get help, because then they'll kill all of us. And he knew that it was real serious, and because he was like, "All right, man, come on, we'll go in there and get those fucking guys." And it was like for real. I jump out of the car. I said, "Hold on!" And I jump out of the car and I leap over the fence they busted down, go into the backyard, and I notice the doors are open. So somebody I know is inside the house for sure now. I go into the house and I look to see who's inside, and you know who I see? I see this one guy I'd never met before. And he was from Garland, and I see Lucio's, my mom's boyfriend's daughter, who was a severe drug addict, and I was told was like an ex-prostitute. And Julian told me, and my mom always hated that girl. My mom would never talk good about that girl. She always said a lot of bad shit about that girl, and they never got along, and you know, that's what I always remember. And as soon as I saw him, I said, "What the fuck are you doing in my house?" He goes, "Oh, my dad gave us the key, said we could come inside." And this guy, Mexican guy, he looked at me, and he looked kind of like he had kind of a mohawk, so he looked like he was kind of fancy and dressy. And he looked at me like, "Okay, you got a knife? We're gonna kill each other right now, for real." Like, there's nothing confusing about this. You're in my house, and I didn't have a weapon on me, and I don't know if he did, but he looked at me. Let's fight inside the house. And I looked over at her, and I wasn't showing scared, because I looked a lot more powerful than this guy. I mean, he was smaller than I was, and I know that I could outpower him easily. And because I was working out at that time, and I'm 18 years old. And I said, he goes, "Nobody told me this. Your dad told you said you can come inside the house?" "Oh yeah, we forgot something, or we needed to get something for him," or some shit like that. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm kind of thinking to myself, I want her to beat both their asses. But I want to go after this guy, because I don't know who the fuck this guy is, and you don't have a key. So I open the door, and I forgot her name. I don't know what her name is. I open the door and I signal to Billy, and he's in the car with his window open, ready to jump out of the car, like to go fight into the people that just broke into the house. And I wave at him and I say, "It's all right. There's two people in here. It's one of my mom's. I don't know who sent these people, but it's one of my mom's boyfriend's daughters." And I go back, and he said, "Oh, okay, all right, man. You can be all." He goes, "You gonna be okay? You gonna be all right?" "Yeah, I should be fine, man. I'll call you a little bit later, or in a couple of days." I go back inside the house, and they're sitting in the living room couch. And I kind of just start walking around the house to see if they broke into anything, looks kind of anything scuffled. And everything kind of seems mostly intact for the most part. but they knew that we pulled up on the driveway. They heard us, so they were probably sitting on the couch to make it look like they were just talking on the phone, or make it look like they were trying to busy doing something else, and that wasn't the truth. Anyway, I looked at him, and he goes, "Your dad?" He goes, "Yeah." And Lucy has no right over to my dad's house, no access, he should no authority over at all. He shouldn't have. So what happens is they almost immediately get up, and they get into their car and leave almost immediately, like they know that we're in the wrong place. And this Mexican guy, it was straight up like, we're gonna kill you, like murder in the eyes. It was like, I'm gonna kill you. We're gonna kill each other. I'm gonna try to kill you. Because he knows he's on my property. He knows I'm 18. He knows he just broke in. Legally, I don't know if you could probably get into any better circumstances legally to kill someone when they break into your house and you don't know who they are, and they're looking at you very crazy and you've never met them. And he was just kind of mad dogging me as he was walking away. And it made me nervous. This is real life. Within 4 to 5 months later, no more than 5 months, Billy is murdered. Real life, Billy is murdered. This is what happens. The day before the day that he's murdered, I don't know about it. 3 weeks later passes. 2 weeks later, I think it was like 2 weeks passed by, like a week. Was it like a week? It was like a week or 5 days. Like, I get a phone call 4 and 5 months later, and Mary tells me, she said, something happened to Billy. And he goes, something happened to Billy. Nobody's heard about him for about 5 days, 3 days. It was like, no, we've been trying to call him on his phone. They were trying to call him on his phone, and they were trying to contact him. His dad, Mary, Alicia, several people, his girlfriend. He wasn't picking up the phone. He disappeared. And Mary told me this, and she said, and this is at like 9. This is like 8:30 or 9. This is like 9 o'clock at night. It's dark outside like this right now when they call me. It's about 9 o'clock, 8:30, but it's dark. It's the sun has just set down, and they said that he wasn't picking up the phone. He was missing for about a week. So they say something bad happened to him. So I think they already knew he was murdered, but she didn't know. They wanted to know if I had anything to do with it, or would I. And I picked up the phone and I talked to them, Mary, and she said, I need you to do something. And he goes, something happened to Billy. He's missing. They don't know what happened to him. He's gone. They're trying to reach to his phone. He's not picking up his phone. I said, we think something bad happened to him, because this is not him. This is not his behavior. So I end up, and Mary tells me, she says, can you go to his house, knock on his door, and try to get his dad and his girl, see if they're home, and see if you can contact them and let them know that we're trying to contact Billy. So I get out of my house and I'm blasting, running, at 9 o'clock at night, 9 to 9:30, running past the post light and to his house, and I had this eerie feeling that something bad happened, something real bad happened. Like, the way that Mary sounded on the phone, it was like someone was murdered. Like, he was like, the way I just felt like something really bad happened. I go to his house and it's just right around the corner. It's like 3 houses down from Chris Martinez. It's like 3 or 4 houses down from Chris Martinez, who I used to DJ with all the time. I think Chris Martinez even met him a couple of times. And up when he was at Roberts, we used to box and watch movies. And when I went there, knocked on the windows, I knocked on all the windows, I knocked on the door, nobody was there. It was empty. And I get back to the house, and I called Mary, and I said, nobody's answering the doors, there's nobody there, all the lights are turned off. She says, okay. She says, I'm going to call you, try to keep calling him, and, if you hear anything about him, give us a call right away. I say, okay. And I don't know what's happened. There's nothing more that's been told to me. So I pick up the phone for the next 3 or 4 days. I'm calling him repeatedly. Billy, I don't know if I texted him, but I tried calling him, leaving voicemail. Hey man, are you okay? Like, what, Mary's calling me saying something happened. You all right, man? Give me a call. Give me a call, man. I haven't heard from you. It's just and I had he always drove by my house, always saying hello and honking. We just drove by because, people don't know the extent of us hanging out and brotherhood kind of feel. So after Mary calls me, like, I think it was like a week later or 5 days later, 5 to 7 days later, she calls me again. And she says, Billy, something bad happened to Billy Hector. He was murdered. And she started kind of like crying over the phone. Like kind of chuckle cry. And she was just crying that he was murdered. And I said, I'm like freaking out, like, what the fuck? Like, you don't understand this. There isn't any connection to anyone I knew that was even close to a fraction that could potentially even want to do anything to him like that. That there wasn't, still to this day doesn't make sense. And I am like in total shock. And she says that I'm 18 years old at this time. No, I'm sorry, I'm 19. I'm 19 because this is after Robert Zarate passes away. I'm 19 years old. Okay, I'm 19 years old when this happens. And Mary says that she says that the police department, she said the investigation and the law enforcement, this is the investigation, police said that they have an idea they had said that they're looking into it, but they said they kind of have maybe some clues of who might have done it. Said that she said that there was about 8 or 10 guys that jumped him. There was a bunch of them, all like just beating him. And once they beat him, I don't know how bad it was. It had to have been really bad because he was a boxer. He was about my size at that time, but he had a little bit better. In my opinion, he had a better bone structure. Like he built almost kind of like model, kind of like he was built very well. And he was my weight class. And so we're the same height. And we're the same exact height. And so he ends up, say that he gets beat up. They said they tied him up, threw him in the back trunk of the car, tied him up, put something over his head so he couldn't see what was going on after they beat him. They drove into the middle of nowhere, and they say they dumped his body off in some area deep far away from civilization and from people, and they put him on his knees, and they shot him in the back of the head, and they left him there. And he was still tied up and had the bag over his head when they found his body. The guys took off, and she said that by this time it's already been about probably 10 days. So I think that it had been about a week that he had been murdered. They're asking questions, finding out, and then I get a phone call. So I think, I don't know but by this time she said that he was for 2 to 3 weeks. I'm gonna say I thought it was about 3 weeks. She said that his body was decomposing out in the middle of nowhere, and I mean the worst of things, the worst. His body was being picked off. His body was being completely dismantled by the animals and decomposing. And it was difficult for me to think that, because when I'm calling him, all I'm thinking about is I'm calling his dead body. Like he's dead somewhere, shot in the back of the head, and he has his phone with him, and I'm calling him to find out what's going on, like everyone else. That's what I'm thinking. And I don't know that he's deceased. So, like they said, they found his body, and they said, and then like, I think Mary called me a third time, and she said like a couple of days later, or I don't know, maybe a month later, and she said they think they might have think they knew who did it. They said the investigation's ongoing, but they have some clues about what's going on. And usually the police department and all that, they're very quick to find out when somebody does a murder like that. You know that they probably didn't care about the forensics and all this other shit. You're gonna get caught probably pretty fast. They had the people that did that they probably didn't care too much about how much they were gonna get away with it, but they got caught. And so said that they had an idea, and he said that they thought that there was some affiliating with this guy Tomate, which I don't know how much if he was involved in it or knew it was distant friends, but they said that he was possibly a distant person that was associated with what was going on and what happened. So he ends up. There's a burial. There's a burial. I don't get a phone call about the burial. They buried him. There's no proper burial that I'm aware of. In fact, all the friends and anybody that knew him never talked about him. Never said, I went to the funeral. I never heard anyone. Never heard anyone. Daniel Box knew who he was. And because he used to be, Daniel Box has Robert Zarati's tattoo on his back. And we were so close. Me, Daniel, and Robert, we were, every single day, but that's what happened. And I talked about these videos, and by this time, I'm 19 years old, and I'm just left with my mom doesn't even give a shit at this point. My mom doesn't. I think I tell my mother, and what I thought was my mother is not my mother, and she doesn't give a shit. She's just more thinking about her. Oh, okay, you had a friend died. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. And I'm thinking about the safety of my life. I'm thinking about this guy showing up from Garland. I mean, there's a very clear, distinctive look. This guy was Mexican. He was full blown from the hood Mexican, and they both looked like they were on methamphetamines. They looked like they were kind of on meth. Like you ever see somebody smoking meth and been up for maybe a few days or doing crazy shit? But they were dressed kind of nice. He was kind of dressed kind of nice, but he had these sunken eyes, like he was just like, you could tell that he didn't care about going to prison and jail very much. And so he ends up. That I get the phone call and says, yeah, and I don't know what the process is, if there's even a burial. I don't know how the forensics, but I never got a phone call that there was a burial. There was never, and it was really messed up because me and him were crying right next to each other when Robert Zarati was being buried, and we were all putting dirt. We all passed the shovel, and we were crying, and it was very hard, and we were watching Robert's casket being lowered, and and I was next to him, and I remember him crying the way that he did, and the last of us that were there to watch the actual Robert's casket go down into the ground, there was just a number of us. Ricky was there. Ricky was like a couple people next to me. Daniel, Box, Billy was next to me, and we were just watching our brother, our best friend, our family member being buried and killed so suddenly. And I remember the way that he cried. He cried pretty heavy. He cried very, very heavy. And that was it. Now at this point I'm nervous. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck can break into a house. I don't know who else may want to come after me, because I don't know. There's two sides. I don't know these people, and I don't know. I think it was just a bad scenario where it just, like, the luck of the draw. You just come across a murderer. Because you came across somebody that just really wanted to just kill somebody, just to kill them, just to get like a trophy out of it. There wasn't any purpose to it. And there's plenty of people like that. But that was it. Shortly after he was murdered, within, let me see, I tell my mother he was murdered. I tell what I thought was my mother, but it's her twin. It's fooling me the whole time. Because my mom's already been ran over by a forklift. And I tell him, Billy, this. He ends up, within, I was 19, within 5 months I get kicked out of my house. I think within about 6 months, maybe not even. I would say within a few months, I'm already being told, you gotta leave. I don't want you in the house. Go live on the streets. I don't care about your life. That's what my mother was saying. That's what her twin was saying. So within 6 months to 3 months, I get thrown out of the house, and I just have somebody that was murdered. And she doesn't show any remorse. When Robert Zarate showed up, I didn't know that wasn't my mother. That was her twin. I can't even describe how disrespectful that could have been to my mother, to Robert Sr. and Selena, and what she would to pose. You don't know who the fuck this person is, and that's very disturbing. Alicia, nobody would lie. I don't like that. Because she was kind of trying to get everyone's attention to feel sorry for her. And I don't know what the fuck was going on. It could have been my mother, but I knew it because the way that she seemed kind of different. She looked different. And that was it. And then within 6 months is when Billy gets murdered after Robert's death. So I'm 18 December, and then sometime in August, I think, when he was murdered, August or September or something like that. When I was then turned 19, 7 months later, 8 months later, he's murdered. I tell my mother, she doesn't care. She doesn't show any remorse. She doesn't care about my life. She didn't show very much empathetic at all. I'm like, I wasn't around bad people, and I don't know what happened, but she didn't pertain to care about my life or that I was going to be alive. It was more about money. It was more about what I'm going to take and what I want. And that's what even frightened me even more. So now I know. I don't know about her twin. I don't know who was telling her to say this, but it was professional psychologists and the hateful attitude that they want. There's 2 dead bodies, 2 young kids that are now being killed. Remember, also, my mom's boyfriend had a kid named Junior, and he was killed by an 18-wheeler with 3 other kids in a Civic hatchback. And there was 2 kids that were killed, 3 kids that were killed in the car. There was 4 of them, and one of the kids ended up in a wheelchair and brain damage for the rest of their life. They were completely fucked up. They were in a wheelchair just like this, just completely the 18-wheeler crushed them as they were racing on the highway or something, an 18-wheeler, and the 18-wheeler and it killed my mom's stepson. He gets killed. He gets killed 4 months before Robert Zarate dies. And I'm 18 years old. And he gets killed in August. Then December, the day of Christmas, or the day after Christmas, Robert Zarate gets killed in a car with Edward. Then 7 months later, Billy gets murdered. And Julian's best friends with this kid. You know, Julian's really good friends with this junior who died. He used to sleep in the same room, was very close with him, and he gets killed. That was the last of that situation. And that was it. So when Billy gets murdered, within a few months I get kicked out. I gotta fend for my life. My mother didn't seem to show any empathetic. I don't know what was going on, but there's the whole expression, how not just what she said, it was, I don't really give a shit about your life. I just want to go do me. I want to just go take care of me and take care of me. I don't care about your life. My dad isn't dead yet. My dad is about to die. I know that my dad doesn't have more than a couple of years. Now I have Billy, Robert Zarate, Edward Rangel, and Junior. All 4 kids that died. 3 in car accidents, 1 that's murdered. And I'm late 19 years old, and I know that my dad doesn't have more than maybe 2 years left to live. Probably not even that. Maybe a little bit more. Who knows? But I know he doesn't have very much time left. And I have to know that this is the reality of life that we live in, and now he's going to die. And the money and all these things are now, and this is really weighing down on me. This is too much pressure. There's too much that's going on. I don't know how to deal with this. You know, I'm reaching out to anyone I can. I was telling Robert about, Senior and Robert Zarate about when my mother, nobody liked my mother. Nobody did. And, they were really about family. Robert Zarate was all about family. It's all about giving you food and shelter and making your life purposeful, making your life, what they call optimistic forward, is to help nourish your life to make it better for the future. That life is worth living while you're young, to treasure that so as you get older, to make something of your life, not lose your youth. And they were very much like that. And so I get kicked out. I go to a couple friends' houses, and my dad dies within another 8 months. I think it was like another 8 months or something like that. 7 months, my dad dies. So at this point, I think I'm living with Nick Herrera's dad for like 3 months. Then I move in with another friend who I worked with, John Lieberton, and he was a graphic designer, and he DJ'd as well. And I lived with him for about a month. And then I don't remember where else I lived. And then my dad dies, then I get an apartment. So, and that was it. But all this tragedy and all these things wasn't being accounted for. And, I can never express how much I really owe to Robert Zarate, who's no longer alive. He was more of a brother to me than any brother I'd ever have, in my life. That, I was very close to Frankie, and, close to Julian when he was a little kid, but when it came to Frankie and me were probably closer than me and Julian was. And for me, it was more kind of watching out after Julian. But when it came to some sort of, there was probably no one better, because we had so many great times. We went after girls, and he was a very giving person, very, very pure, very beautiful soul, is what people would refer to it as. And there was no remorse. There was no remorse. There was no empathy. There wasn't any empathy. It was just nobody seemed to give a shit. But by this time, that was the last. And I talked about in my other video, I was 21 or 22 years old when I went to the barber shop. And that's when Bethel, he's a little tiny short guy, real short, tiny, almost kind of like just real short, tiny. I'm talking like he's like 5'1" for a guy, and just like almost kind of like a midget, almost tiny guy. And he's the one that said that he thought he knew who maybe did it. And it took them, I think, like, I don't know what it was, but Mary was sort of looking after that situation, and she didn't say anything to me until like a year after they found the person that did it or something. But they ultimately did, when I was like somewhere around within a year or a year and a half, within about a year and a half, they found out who did it, and they arrested the person that killed Billy, and he's in prison now. But I don't know what happened to the other people. I don't know what happened to the party of 10 people that jumped him. I don't know what the story was, but that was the last of this. And I talked about this in so many videos. Hopefully, it brings more of an understanding to the picture of my life. And making me pass gas. And but it was hard to express, how nerve-wracking that was. I was very, when I moved into my apartment, it was like a month after my dad died, and I was waking up in cold sweats, like I was traumatized. You ever seen the movie Mortal Kombat, where like you see Liu Kang, like he has visions of like his brother being killed, and he's fighting in the temple, and it was kind of like he wakes up scared, thinking like, his brother gets murdered. That's what I was having. I was having visions of Billy being murdered, and I was very scared. And I remember walking outside. I'd start smoking cigarettes, and I'd take a walk around the block just to think about my life, and think about. I was so devastated because nobody cared. Like nobody gave a shit. Like nobody cared. I don't know how to express it. It was like somebody just gets murdered, thrown in a casket, bodies decomposing. And nobody's like thinking to themselves like family, like nobody cared. It was just about who's gonna die next, who's gonna get the fucking money next. I don't care who fucking dies, I survive better. And it didn't seem like anybody cared. And I was for like a year, maybe a little more, I was traumatized. I was waking up in the middle of the night scared, looking out my window and thinking that, thinking that that's probably how they got Billy, and thinking that, like what happened, whatever happened to that situation, and just thinking to myself, like my friend just gets killed, all these tragedies, I'm the only one left alive and shit, so it feels like. And I remember just looking out the window and just scared, and looking to see if anybody was following me. Not following me, but looking just to see if I could see anything. And, just maybe making it eventful, I don't know. But I was shaking up thinking about that, and like how worthless human life gets killed, and nobody really wanted to make anything of it other than just, I don't care. It affected me. I'm living in this house, and, obviously Daniel was going through a hard turmoil. He disappeared, and the entire family, Zarate family, broke up. Everybody did their own life. Everybody did. Got married, had kids very quickly. They all got their house, an apartment. It was over. That was it. It was all over. The family, the atmosphere. So that was it. But I was very traumatized, and for a long time. But at least a year, and reminiscing and kind of reminiscing, and that was it. But I thought I'd talk about that, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this before. This one particular thing that I remember thinking of is when I said I walked around my apartment complex many years ago when I went through chemotherapy. I was 23 years old when I went through chemotherapy. It was like 3 months after, it was 5 months. I got diagnosed in May. And then in June I had my transplant, got admitted in the hospital. I get diagnosed in May of 2007, and I'm 23 years old, 5 months after my birthday, and I go through chemotherapy, I go through the transplant, and I lost all my hair. I was like, everything was bald, no hair. The maintenance people knew who I was. It was some Mexican guys, and we kind of had some funny confrontations when I was there. A little short guy, and I remember this. And he was a cool Mexican guy, though. And I remember he showed up, and he was some cool Mexican guys. Like, they knew the onda, like I knew they were cool. They were cool Mexican guys. And so I remember this Mexican guy. I saw him off and on, and I necessarily didn't trust anybody, even the maintenance people. And then I made it kind of clear of that sort of my expression, because I just didn't trust anybody. Especially I'm young, and all these deaths and murders, and my dad dying, it was just bad. And so when I lose all my hair, I'm wanting to go work out. So you know what I do? I end up with a tube in my chest. I have a tube in my chest that goes to my neck, and it's a port, and it looks like tentacles. It looks like little tentacles and shit. I know it looks kind of crazy looking, but it's like a wire tube, and it's so that they can administer the chemo and all the different medications instead of having to poke me all the time. And it's easier, and it flows through the brain and heart and body much more easier. And it's supposed to be healthier, I think, as well. But I had that port in my chest for at least a whole month. I had to sleep with it out once I got out of the hospital. And I was bald, and it was about 7 days after I got home. And Julian, it was about 2 weeks. Julian had already moved in and left, and he stayed there for like 10 days, 14 days at most. It was like 10 days that he stayed, then he left. And I'm bald. I'm still on steroids. They have me on steroids, and my face gets really round, plump, really plump, very plump. Very thin eyebrows, very thin mustache. All the hair is gone all over my body. And I have these pajamas, these real cozy looking pajamas, my Adidas, and a t-shirt. And I remember it was still pretty warm outside. And I remember sometime during the day jogging, because I wanted to go jog. I was like, I gotta stay healthy. I gotta work out. I was doing everything that I thought could make me, like, trigger my body to be alive, like not just the learning new things, obviously still scratching, but doing minor workout, or like running and working out to try to make my body instinctively try to make it survive. And I remember it'll be good for my heart, but not to run too rigorously. And I remember running a few laps. I ran like a full lap, and I was heavy set. And when I was running, you could see the tube kind of moving out of my chest like that, like I had tentacles or some shit. And I remember the maintenance guy, the little short Mexican guy, and a couple other people just staring at me, and from a far distance, because they saw how healthy I looked for a long time. and how I was well taken, because the maintenance people really kept an eye on me and knew what was going on a lot of the times. And so they ended up, um, the guy saw me, he just looked at me like, damn, that guy looks like he's about, because I looked like I was about to die. Completely bald head, like shiny. Like, you see how my skin is all over here? It was like that all over my, no beard, no hair, nothing. And I was real round and plump, and I looked like I gained about, I think I gained like 20 pounds. 25. I gained like easily 25 pounds, and I was real plump. And I remember running and him, and I remember feeling embarrassed. Not embarrassed, but like, there was a part of me that was very deeply embarrassed, like to say that I was still a person. And I remember running and thinking to myself, I was like, I was going to say, I went through chemotherapy, and wanted to say life is, being alive is a very beautiful blessing. You never know what can happen to your life. And I'm a perfect example of being young in this tragic event, yet I'm still walking and I'm all bald, and specifically cancer, because I don't look like a cancer patient. Cancer patients particularly have a following, they're really old or fragile, but I didn't fit the criteria of a cancer patient to look like that. And I'm 5'11" here and 23 years old, and I remember them looking at me and I remember just feeling embarrassed. In Spanish they would say, me dio mucha vergüenza cuando me estaba mirando, porque sentí como me estaba mirando como yo era defecto, like I was defected, because I had never had, when people know you have a disease, there's a certain type of look they give you. It's like, you were healthy and now you're like contaminated with a disease, and it was very unsettling. But I knew he didn't necessarily mean he was in shock. He was like, "You had cancer?" He just remember looking at me, and he was just like, his eyes wide open, like, this guy has cancer. Like, I remember, like, I was just getting stares, because I'd be running, and if you've ever seen a 21-year-old, have you ever seen like a young 20-year-old, early 20s, walking down the street all bald, chemotherapy looking and swollen, look like he has cancer? Everyone will stare at you. And I remember running, like not running, but jogging slightly, doing a slow jog, and cars were driving by me just staring at me, and my eyes were pretty dilated from being up for so many days and the drugs, and I couldn't walk anywhere without people just staring at me, and they were just staring and just like jaw dropped, like this guy's very sick, like he looks very ill. He how can somebody so young like that just get cancer? It's like if you saw somebody very healthy and with a beard and hair and handsome looking, you wouldn't think to themselves, once they lost all their hair, you'd be in shock, like, how does somebody like that get cancer? How does somebody like that get, because when you're bald like that, it's always a symbol of cancer. And that's what happened to me. And so I remember that. I remember jogging to try to think to myself, I gotta try to maintain life somehow, and took a couple jogs, and I didn't want to put too much pressure on my cardiovascular system, because I felt like I didn't want my heart to explode. I didn't want anything bad to happen, and I had to monitor my body, because I talked about when I first got home, within 4 days to 5 days when Jillian was there, I had like a heart attack. Like, I felt like a heart attack, and I told my doctor about this, and it felt like somebody grabbed a pitchfork, not a pitchfork, but like an ice pick, and just stabbed me right in the chest, like a needle, like a fucking sharp, very sharp pencil needle into my chest. And I remember just screaming, like I thought I was having a heart attack, and I screamed out Jillian. I screamed out and I said, "Oh!" or something like that. And I said, Julian, and I did this, and he got up real quick, and then I was kind of holding my chest, and I thought I was having a heart attack, dying. And the doctor told me it was because of the chemotherapy and it was because of the transplant. But they said it was because the drugs and the chemotherapy causes the heart to have like a minor stroke, heart attack kind of deal. So she said it was probably something close to that. But she didn't really seem all that worried about it. I was terrified. I thought I was having a heart attack when it all happened. But that's what it felt like. And I remember just like I had that particular type. It felt like one of my arteries. It felt like an artery was about to rupture. Like you know how you have these arteries in the hearts that flow blood through your heart and body. It felt like it was about to. It felt like it was going to rupture a hole in it, or rupture, and I was going to bleed or something, bleed to death, internal bleeding or some shit. I was pretty nervous about it, but that was the end of it. So when that ended up, but I thought I'd talk about that video. You know, it was a very tough situation to deal because I had to take care of myself. But I remember thinking of that, and I didn't think about that until now. It's like I remember running around my entire apartment complex. And I remember I always wore a hat because I didn't want people to see my face, and I didn't want people to see my eyes to scare them about death. Because you know, when you see somebody with cancer like that, it's all healthy, and you walk into the office and you see that you look like you're about to die in real life, I didn't want to put negative vibes to them, so I was very kind and very talkery. So I was like, okay, I go, thank you, yeah, you have a good day. And I tried to avoid, because at this time I'm getting an hour of sleep every night for like a whole week. For 10 days, I'm getting like 2 hours of sleep, and in my eyes, I'm, you know, like mortality. I'm facing my death. Like I'm very shaken internally, and so I end up. So I tried to cover I always wear a hat or try to cover my face because I didn't want people to get traumatized of sort of that world of that, you know, just to keep things positive. But thought I'd make a video on that. It was hard. Nobody cared for my life at that time. Nobody stuck around. I had to take care of myself, and you know, I was dying, and I felt like I was dying when I was in my apartment. The entire recovery situation, I had to just take care of myself, and I had to think of the universe. I had to think of God. That hopefully I have to keep faith. Faith is more important than anything else. I always kept faith that God is watching, and God has an existence and a purpose for me still being alive, greater than the horrors of what people have done to me and still do to me this day. But what they've done to me, what's happened, there's a bigger purpose. And you know, I took care of myself. I had to cook for myself. You know, nobody called me to see if I was okay. Even John Basili, I think John Basili called me once or maybe twice, but nobody. I think no more than twice in the entire 6 months. But I never heard from him again, and nobody called me to see if I was alive or okay. Julian called me once, and when he called me once, he just didn't give a shit. He sounded like over the phone, like he was doing a chore, and I didn't want to bother him. Sarah and Cooper, who worthless bitch of what this motherfuckers didn't call, but maybe once, and it was very quick just to hang up the phone on me. Kenneth called me once, and that was it. Just called me once. Kenneth called me once, and he was just, that's about it. But there was no one. I knew that if I was going to die, I was going to die alone. But I have faith in God. Your faith is, to me, always more important, because your beliefs, the things that you think you're going to get, and all these can all be broken and whatever. But faith is more important than anything, because because it doesn't provide proof. It's just faith that God exists and He has an purpose for human life. And it is as horrible as it is in this world. For some reason, human beings are on Earth, and the faith of God is the reason why what we need to be as humans. So, but that was pretty much it. That was pretty much it. Very, very sad. If they ever made a movie about it, it'd be very sad, because there was no one there who cared. There were so many times where I wished I wanted somebody to give a fuck, or I wanted to be, in a home where you see these TV commercials where they're living in their house and their mother or their brother's really nourished and they're all family and they all get scared and make sure they make it work. There was no love like that at all. It was just, oh, you're alive, you're okay, or you're just stuck in the corner. Nobody cared. It wasn't like TVs, it was very lonely. But I always stayed grateful. It was lonely, but I stayed grateful and I stayed to keep faith in God. But it was hard. Crying alone in my apartment, crying in my room, crying when I get in my car sometimes, when I was on chemo, even when my hair grew back a couple of times, but I remember crying several times in my car when I was under the chemotherapy and all swelled up from the steroids. It makes you very emotional. The steroids does make you very emotional, but I remember that, crying alone, and it was so sad, just sad. And I was doing the best I could, And so that was that. That was that with that particular situation is that was that with that particular situation. I don't ever think about that anymore. I remember the days crying when I was going to make doctor visits to Dr. Tang or Veriscala in my car, and I try to hold back on crying in tears sometimes. I try not to cry because it was so devastating, having to take care of myself like that after so much tragedy, and nobody really gave a fuck. And I didn't want to bother anybody, as long as I had a good chance of recovery, which I did. It was very sad getting out of the car, thinking to myself, and about I nearly just died. Get this disease, and just thinking about the things I wanted and dreamed of. Felt like all my dreams were broken at that time as well. And nobody knew for like a year. I was very tired all the time. I was very sick. I started breaking out on my face. Very bad with acne. Very horrifically with acne. Very, very bad. Very, very, the worst of acne you can imagine on somebody's face. This is what happened to me. But, you watch these commercials with cancer patients, and you watch them when people are very young, and you think to yourself, because a lot of the commercials, and when you watch people in hospitals, you see how they're caring toward people most of the time. But when you go to like nursing homes, you watch people die like I did, and I don't know, they just shot me real violently here. Real violently, it sounded like somebody just shot a needle, like burned my skin. And it makes my arms do this. Do you see why they do this? It's a psychological poison is what they're doing, administering poison. But I thought it was important for me to talk about because, I'd go pick up a hamburger, Whataburger or something, and I'd be fucking choking holding back tears, eating by myself in my car. I had these tubes in my chest, and I parked my car, and I almost had trouble eating the food. I had trouble eating the food because I'm like so emotional and crying. Not like huckling crying, but holding back tears just to try to finish my meal and not have all these visions in my life. And you think your life is going to get treasured like it does in the commercials, and it doesn't. You think that it does, and it doesn't. You think that it you think that it does, and it doesn't. And nobody cares. Nobody gave a shit. I get out of my car and I'm walking, and there's all these visions and all these words, and I'm thinking, it's all these videotapes of going through my mind, and I think to myself, I'm gonna remember this forever. I'm gonna remember this forever, and I don't remember very much of it anymore. And the thing that bothered me so much about it also is because I wasn't given a chance to remember that. And even though that it was a very big tragedy, I wanted to remember a lot of the great details of that experience, because it was literally like a movie. If I said everything from the beginning of 21 years old to 23 to 24 to my transplant journey and everything, it was a movie. I get thundering lightning when I got diagnosed. The hospital lights all shut off. There was the trees were flying into the fucking windows. It was crazy shit, crazy stuff that was going on at that time. It'd be a movie, but it would be very scary. It would be, I wanted to remember a lot of the situations. I wanted to remember most of it. But I wasn't, when you're like getting tickets and you're like, right after your hair grows back, you're not given a chance of recovery. You don't have the chance to not just appreciate life well, but to over the years try to remember that and treasure your life and that journey you had with cancer and chemotherapy and transplant. I don't get to treasure that because I was getting, from the age of 24 to 28 years old, I got just about 35 to 40 police officer traffic citation tickets, all targeted after me. I had no time to remember, to treasure, to think, to focus on God. I had no time for that. And when I do, I get punished for it. This is how bad it is. It just gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And I thought it was worth me talking about, because that's one of the things that bothered me so much, is that I wasn't able to remember that. And I wanted to remember so much of that, and I wasn't allowed to. But I thought I would talk about that, because even as I talk about this chemotherapy journey, I'm very bothered right now because they shot something real violently right here, and it felt like somebody just burned me with a cigarette or something. And the reason they do that is because they know that I'm going to grab, and they cause me to close my arms. It's not because I don't love myself. It's because they want to poison my head with what they did. Remember, they're shooting and they're doing this psychology to me. But when I was at the cemetery, they were kicking my face, they were kicking my throat, and I were kicking my ribs, and I got fractured ribs. Do you see how crazy this psychology is what they're doing to me? But I'm being kicked in my throat and face, punted, not kicked, punted, like a punt, not a kick, a punt to the ribs, throat, and face at a cemetery when I'm 31 years old, and they're shooting this electronic device at me because it gets you to close your arms, and it simulates a poisonous, like a hug or something like that. But they're beating the fuck out of me. But when I'm nearly digging in a trash can, they don't want to give me plenty of money to make sure. They don't want to tell people to get the fuck away. They don't want to tell. That's what I'm talking about with these electronic devices and how crazy it is, that I don't think that maybe it has nothing to do. It's just these people are really fucking crazy what they're doing to me. But I wanted to make this video, and I think it's very important. I'm proud of the situation. I'm very proud that how I dealt with it alone, taking care of myself. Very proud. I did the best with what I had, what I could, what was available to me, and not to bother other people with that. And I'm very proud. I'm very happy of that, because I felt that God was with me. I felt I had faith, and more. But so much of this is I really wanted to remember a lot of it, and I really wasn't able to go into have a good remembrance. That's one of the most painful things that I remember, getting so many tickets and being thrown against the fucking car by police officers, or roughed up when they would arrest me at my job site, like 10, 15 times out of the tickets I got. When they take me to jail because I have warrants for my arrest because I couldn't pay for the tickets, is that I was getting so bitter and angry because I couldn't cherish and I couldn't remember it, to hold on to the simple things in life, because they were just threatening me, harassing me at job sites and giving me these tickets. They wanted to deplete me of all human civilization acquired to help myself. If you think that people even gave a fuck about your life, wait until they take all your fucking money away from you right after you get cancer, and then threaten you, and they use it just to imprison your life. And most cancer patients, like when they're young, there's a lot of incredible stories where they're able to kind of move on with their life, but they were able to remember that very detailed very well. I wasn't really allowed to. I thought I was going to remember most of it, or a lot of it. I don't remember a lot of the details, and that's what's so sad about it. But that's the way it goes. Some people have it worse, but I had to take care of myself when it was time to die. When it was time for God to say whether I was going to be alive anymore on this earth, I had to take care of myself. And the only person that's going to be with you in this world and when you're out of this world is going to be God. And what faith you have in that. It's very hard to go into conversations about that, because the psychology of what people do to you, they don't see anything wrong, and they go to their graves that way. Very with the most grateful, imaginable things you can experience in life. They never think that what they did to me, like right now that they shot me, they'll go to their graves never thinking to themselves they did everything any bad, and never feel like they're going to go to with Satan, dancing with Satan and Lucifer and worshiping Lucifer, because that's what they did. They just psychology. It was administration. It's just, this is military. Remember Marine that got burned alive? This is just how we do it. And they don't, there's not a conversation or just register those types of people. And it's very upsetting because they know what they shouldn't be applying that to me, but they do it anyway. But anyway, I'm glad I was able to take care of myself. I'm glad I was able to be alone. If I would have chosen it if at that time, I wanted the recovery to be better than that, but I'm glad that it was. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. I had an apartment, and I had chemo, and I had a car. I had money. I had, not a lot of money. I had $30 to go get something to eat extra. $60, $70 extra a week to go get a hamburger, to get a French fries, and go get a milkshake, or get a Route 44 at Sonic. I was grateful. I'd go rent some movies at the Blockbuster or Redbox. I might bring them to my apartment and watch movies. I was grateful for that. I had all this chemo and stuff that was going on, but I was grateful, and I was prepared for, that was going to be the end. If God said that was going to be the end of my life. But that's the way it went.